session, and this one is about celebrating our creativity. So let me call up my first speaker, Femi Oduwemi. Come up. Femi runs the production company, and he's also one of the, he's on the board of the Oscars, so that's a man to know. Next to him is Adam Lewis. God, I know this stuff. So Nariwo, who is the founder of the Rele Art Gallery, which is in LA and in Lagos. So yeah, just sit there. And then Bibi Bakare. Bibi Bakare, who is from the Cassava Republic. If you're in publishing and you don't know her, then you're not in publishing. Let's put it that way. And then last but not least is Richmond Mensah, who runs Manju Journal, which is a Ghanaian digital publication. This is my panel, and they're all here because they represent different sectors. Femi represents film, you represent art, publishing, and then he's just all over everything. So I'm going to start with Femi, because we really want to just talk about how do we maintain this trending hashtag that Africa, everyone's dancing to our music, they love our films, that everybody's watching us right now. And I'm just curious, what's it take for us not to, next year, oh, Africa is not the thing anymore. How do we do that in our film industry? How do we maintain this momentum?
Thank you. Really nice to be here, and really I celebrate the world of Africa. No filter. I think it's in film that we really need to invest the most. And investing the most simply means we all need to invest institutionalization. Right now, our cinema in Africa has really come a long way on the wings of individual enterprise. And so we've got to figure out how to build institutions that will sustain what we're doing. And
what kind of institutions do we need?
Well, first and foremost, the platforms for our distribution right now do not have a back end that's African. I mean, we have Netflix, we have Amazon, we have, all the streaming platforms are interested in the African story right now, and they are investing massively in building, story labs, in incentivizing, storytellers. But the back end is not owned by us.
So are you saying we need our own Netflix, our own Amazon?
For you to ultimately sustain a conveyor belt of decolonized stories, you're going to need your own. We can't continue. That's one of the investments that I think is really critical, that will sustain what we are doing on a big scale. But I also think that our governments, authorities need to invest the kind of thinking that really supports local talent. And that means, protection of intellectual property. That means providing incentives for people to come and shoot in locations. That means, just making African environments film-friendly. And that's important right now, because a lot of the films that we're shooting, at least in Nigeria, often the stories are trapped, and the stories are trapped within walls and within studios, and it's very important for us to actually also educate about our spaces. Stories are physical in the end. You've got to be able to feel it, to smell it, to see the spaces, not just the beautiful spaces, but how those spaces shape us and shape our worldview. And for me, I think those are immediate things that we need to do, both as governments and as people, but individually as well. I think a lot of artists need to institutionalize the work they're doing. We need to archive better. We need to figure out how to create processes so that our work is not all over the place. And we need to figure out how to work together. I think there's also a lot of really brilliant artists and storytellers who are working alone. And working alone will not sustain the energy that we currently.
I also think the creative industry is one that actually you create alone. So it's not an easy one to collaborate in. But yeah, so thank you, Femi. I want to move on to Adewale, because you run an art gallery in Lagos and in LA, and people don't immediately think of Africa when you think of art. And somebody once said to me that a couple of years ago at Art Basel, Chinese art was the thing. Everywhere they're selling art, and they went back last year, and nobody was talking about China anymore. How do we make sure that that's not the same that happens with Africa right now?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. I think we don't get a lot of support and funding for the visual arts. And when you talk about a creative economy, we're usually not part of that conversation. So I think it's really great that ANF recognizes that we're here today. Two things for me. I think to continue to sort of sustain any momentum that we currently have is that there has to be more value in terms of, so we have a program called Young Contemporary, which is for very young artists. And when they come to, when we start the program, we ask questions around why is your art relevant? Or, why is it authentic? Why do you want the world to pay attention to you? And so if there's no value in that creation, ideation process, then there's going to be a disconnect, right? So we have to ensure that the artist or the art that we're producing is of value. And you find out that when it is valuable, then it's also sustainable for you as an artist.
What do you mean the art is of value? What do you mean by that?
I mean, your art, has to have depth and it has to be authentic. You have to be given value. That's the only way. I mean, value is an exchange, right? And so the content that we're creating, so yes, we have a gallery, but we're positioning in Los Angeles is that we want people to pay attention to African art, and we want to bring to LA, Los Angeles, and even the US, this idea of art is not just the because when we first actually started there, they had a different idea of what art was. They didn't even know that contemporary art from Africa was a thing. So that's the first thing. And the second part for me, I think, is more platforms. And I know we say platforms all the time, but I think it's really, really important because when we went into Los Angeles, I didn't even know that we were the first African gallery to be there. And so there was a responsibility almost for us to represent an entire continent. And that's a lot of pressure to put on a young gallery that's just, 8 years, and it was all over the news, right? And so having more galleries, having more Black-owned galleries. We don't want to be the only gallery in Los Angeles representing African art because we can only do it from one perspective. But having multiple platforms like that in spaces all around the world, I think is really important.
And here's a question I'm sure every visual artist is asking you. I read recently there was an Ethiopian artist that sold for $9 million, like a piece of her work. How do we get to that level? How do you start selling art for real value, where artists can actually make a sustainable living out of their art?
Listen, I saw that news as well, and I think that we have to understand that Julie, she's one of my favorite artists. It's a totally different infrastructure in which she operates under. And so let's bring it back here to Africa. We do have artists that have come, again with the program that we run, that come from very sort of low-income backgrounds. Building, it's a process, you build, and this idea of wanting to live in and working on the continent and being able to make it out of the continent is very important for us. So artists that go through our program, it speaks for itself. They're able to make a decent, decent is saying in Mali, they're able to make a decent living. So I think it is a process. And $9 million, $10 million is great, but you can eventually get there. But there's certain things, there's certain strategies and infrastructure that are in place for Julie to be able to make it.
But have we got those strategies, infrastructure in place?
Absolutely. I think there are much more developed arts industries. Of course, South Africa is much developed. Nigeria is where it is. I got here on Sunday. And I spent the last 2 days, I think I went to about 12 spaces here in Nairobi, and there's still a lot of work to do, absolutely, and I think...
She's saying that her art is better, Nigerian art is better than
No, it's not about the art itself, it's about the spaces and the platforms and who is controlling it. I think that's where, nothing, the art is nothing about the art.
Cool, well, thank you. So I'm going to move on to Vivi now and publishing, and I'm really kind of excited for the number of African writers beyond Chimamanda. I just read the book Ayobami's book, It's Full of Good Things. Unapologetically Nigerian. She uses Niger slang in there that I keep thinking, they're going to think it's a new character because she don't say Abi, Abi or whatever. And I'm like, she's not writing for an English audience. She's writing for us. And I'm seeing a lot more of that. And is that translating into a stronger publishing sector in Africa?
Thank you so much. No, it isn't. I'm afraid. I think that I don't think it's enough for Africans to tell their own stories. I think it's what Femi said, which is that we have to also own the means of production. And we have Ayobami and a few people. For a continent as large as Africa, it is minuscule in terms of the output. We need way more, and I don't think it's time for us to celebrate yet.
Okay, you're going to have to leave the stage then. So.
Yeah, I don't think it's time to celebrate, but we do have to acknowledge what's going on, and at the same time, what the kind of work that still needs to be done. So, for example, I think, and I want to make a few points, which are that for us to have the longevity that you're talking about and to move beyond trends, we definitely have to build an African publishing infrastructure. And in order to do so, we have to go back to the economic base of the continent. We have to build a viable middle class structure on the continent, and that feeds back to one of your videos where there's a placard about corruption. These are real issues, and these are also part of the African stories that we have to tackle, because if we don't tackle those very real existential political issues, we're not going to be going anywhere far. We might celebrate Africans writing and winning Booker Prize and winning all kinds of awards internationally, but the fact of the matter is, are they translating to economic value? So those things we have to deal with, and we also have to understand the historical and structural issues that's making it impossible or difficult to get where we need to go. But it doesn't mean that it's impossible.
It's not impossible, because you are an organization called Cassava Republic. You are the publisher.
And yeah, we are a publishing house. We've been going for 17 years, and
that's a round of applause. 17 years publishing.
Yeah, and it's great, but I think it should be when we are unable to count the number of publishers on the continent, then I'll be able to sleep better, right? But the fact that I can count the number of publishers on the continent, I can count the number. I know from the top of my head all the writers that have been published in the last 100 years on the continent. We should not know the number of writers that have been published in the last year. We don't know how many writers are published in the UK in a month, let alone in a year. So I want to celebrate what's happening, but I also want to exercise some caution that we have a lot of work to do. And the question, and just before I close, the question of being seen and visible, which is what we're celebrating. We're celebrating representation on the international stage. As Africans, we've always been visible, we've always been represented. This is why it makes it easy for the West to consume us, to extract from us, right? So we've got to be really careful about continuing the extractive relationship that we have. So you have an artwork that has been sold for $9 million. That value is not returning to Africa, it's elsewhere, right? So all of these different complex interrelationships we have to keep in mind whilst we're celebrating. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivi, for bringing us back down to reality. Okay. And no, thank you, seriously, because these are important things that need to be said. So, I want to come to you now because A, you are Ghanaian, and B, you document the creative sector in Ghana. And I know you just put out a book recently, but Ghana is doing really well. Ghana is sort of seen as this kind of creative place. What is the secret sauce? What has Ghana done?
Thank you so much. Hello. Yeah, thank you, Moki, for this opportunity. I think it's very important that we always have these conversations, trying to understand who we are. As we know, that's what we have as the theme, as we are. I always tell people, when it comes to Ghanaian creativity, African creativity in general, it's not like it hasn't been there. It has always been there. What we are currently seeing in Ghana has been there. It's just that we are fortunate enough that the world is finally getting to understand, African creativity or Ghanaian creativity in general. I think one of the things that has also brought about these renaissance, about creativity in Ghana is is one of these initiatives. That was the Year of Return initiative that started in 2019. So the idea for the initiative was to bring together the global diaspora to Ghana, to connect with their roots, to understand who they are as Ghanaian diaspora or African diaspora. And as much as I always believe that, these sort of things are moving on in the country, and that there's so many issues when it comes to the underground work as Ghanaians, we need infrastructures to continue supporting creatives. With what I do for my platform, Manage Journal, I've been working for the past 8 years, and I've been supporting so many creatives, in Ghana, in Africa, even in the diaspora. And I always thought that it was important to get something, as much as we are always talking about these things happening in Africa, Ghana getting the recognition, Nigeria, Kenya, Senegal, we need these resources, we need this, something that we can come back in the next few years to say that this is what happened, and this is something that, as much as we are doing, I think we need more education on this. So that's why I did my first publication, because what I always see in Ghana is that people come in, fetch, and then they go, and then that's it. Like, we don't hear from them. And I thought it was very important that in this moment, as much as we are talking about the creative scene, it was important to celebrate these voices. So that led me to create my first, publication to support creatives in Ghana. And I love what Adewale said about authenticity. I think it's something that is also very important in the work we do. As much as we are seeing all this global buzz about Africa, even with getting an Ethiopian artist work, being commissioned or auctioned for 9 million. We need to continue creating this conversation about how authentic our works need to be. We don't need to put that thing aside. And as much as we are doing this, we also need education. We need people to understand that in the next 5 years, in the next 4 years, what's going to happen. Like for now, you are making the waves as a fashion designer, as a musician, as a poet, as a singer, but in the next 5 years, what can we come back to? So these are some of the things we need, education. And I love what one of my colleagues in Accra is doing with Deacon Center. So he established this. It's a library where he's bringing together so many archival books to Accra that it's open to everyone, even kids, students who are willing to go into art, who are willing to understand what creativity is. So I think these are some of the things we need. We have all these things great. We have all these. The season is now, but we also need these infrastructures that we can come back to in the next 2 or 3 years or 4 years and say that this is what has happened.
So I think what I'm hearing from all of you is that this infrastructure we need. It's not enough to be creative and just be creative. We need infrastructure to support us. And one thing I just want to ask the audience, most of you here are creatives. How many of you do not have a side hustle, as in can sustain yourselves with your creativity? I know Uncle Mo can. Who is entirely sustainable as a creative? Wow. Then you need to hang back and tell the others what you're doing right. Because I think that's the thing, that we do need the infrastructure, which needs investment. And I guess the big question for me is this narrative that we talk about, because in order for you to invest, you need to feel that the environment is right. You need to feel that you'll get a return on your investment. So are we doing enough to make sure that, I know I'm looking at you already, we're not, no, I know. But are we doing enough to make sure that investors see the business opportunity in Africa? So let me speak to you, because the film industry really does need investment. There's a lot of money that goes around. They talked about that film, Black Box, that was filmed for $1 million. I know everybody thinks that Netflix is the savior, but Netflix is actually only in 3 countries. So if you're not in South Africa, Nigeria, or Kenya, if you're not benefiting at all from Netflix, who else is there to bring money into the film market?
Well, in Nigeria, you've got a lot of the banks now setting up what they call film desks. So the loan is available. It's the collateral that's the problem, because there seems to be no understanding that the actual IP is the collateral. And so we've got to figure out how we convince, that's part of the institutionalization thing that's talking about. The money is there because the money is available for investment. And as far as small business goes, and the creative industries is the only place where the possibilities are immense in terms of employment of more people, in terms of generating, activity, economic activity, in terms of export, generating foreign exchange. All of that is what the governments are looking for. But what they're not finding, I guess, in the creative sector is we work alone a lot. And when you work alone, it's very difficult. Your risk is higher. And so when I talked about collaboration, I was talking about building production companies, building archives and catalogs, building valuable things that are physical enough for a financing institution to actually accept as a risk, as a collateral. And I think, when you have 3, 4, 5 people making a film and not making a film of $500,000 each, but making a film of 2.5 million, but there are 5 of you, it's easier to fund because if you do the collaboration right, the markets may also be 5 instead of just 1. So all of that, I think, is really what we need to break down. The bigger problem we have is the absence of data. We still don't have enough data. We make a lot of assumptions. So we say, we're making this amount of money in Nollywood, or Nollywood film has brought back this amount of money. But we don't have the actual raw data for those who make those financing decisions to be able to do a spreadsheet. And I think that's important.
So 2 things. There's a session later on today on film financing specifically, and African Filter has invested in something called the Creative Vibrancy Index, which is actually looking at data in the sector. I mean, things like apparently there's 40,000 cinema screens in America, and there's only about 1,000 across the African continent. Just knowing that shows you the opportunity. So Adewale, I'm going to come to you quickly to say, you talked about the infrastructure in the art world and investment. You live in a country like Nigeria where there are many, many millionaires. Are you seeing these individuals investing in art as an asset class?
I mean, definitely, because when we first started, I have to recognize that the people that sort of supported our program and supported in money and just presence are Nigerians and Africans. So there is that. But in terms of, I'll look at it from 2 sides, from the artist's perspective and also as a gallerist. Artists need more grants, right? So thank you to
philanthropic.
Yes. Because some of the work that artists do take a long amount of time to do, and to sort of maintain that authenticity that we're speaking about, the grants can come in and it's very important for them to continue to create work. From the gallerist perspective, I've been running my business for like over 9 years, and just recently was when we started to look at it from the really business, getting investors into the business. And so over the last 7 months, we've been working with consultants, and he said to me, really, I don't know if I can say, pardon my French, you've been running a very shitty business for the last 9 years. But what I can tell you is that if you've been able to if you're still here, what would sort of happen if we can bring in structure? And so it's so easy for us to get investment because we have all the sort of statements and stuff to show that. And so my encouragement is for people that want to get into the art space is that we need more, as I said, more platforms and more investors to see that it is financially viable to invest in that aspect of things.
Vivi, I'm going to ask you the same question. You said the same thing about more publishers. You've been in the industry for 17 years. If you're not making money, and why are you still there? Because there must be something that keeps you there. There must be something.
Madness. No, but on a serious note, I think that what we need across all the arts, all the creative sector is patient capital. And patient capital is not what's allowed for Africans. Europeans have patient capital. People invest in very long term, and people are prepared to lose money. And so we need people who understand the historical necessity for investing in arts. If we think about the Medici, for example, where they invested in arts, we don't know who the bankers are today, but we remember the artists, right? We remember the cultural workers. So Africans, we need to think in terms of patient capital. We need to think in terms of a 500 years agenda, right? This is the way my mind works. I don't I don't think in terms of 5, 10 years, the reason why I continue in publishing, the fact that even it's really hard, it's difficult, and stuff, is because I want that in 500 years, when our children's children open, when they go into the archive of the future, what are they going to find then? They're going to find books that have been written by Africans, by black people across the globe, unmediated by whiteness or white ownership. So I have to really rethink the business model. So we cannot publish books purely on market force. So you have to think beyond the market, as well as having the market at the back of, well, both at the back and in front of your mind. The market must not dictate in order to retain, I don't want to use the word authenticity, but to retain a certain integrity to the work.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and that's why Africulture is a concept of art. We realize we need to give artists space to create. So imagine we've got like literally no time at all to get off sick. Your experience documenting the creative sector in Ghana.
Personally, what has really pushed me, what has really helped me to get this far is patience. Everything I've been doing with the platform has always been me, and also connecting with the right medium, the right medium and getting the right people to understand what we are doing. It's not just about doing the work, but it's also about getting people to really know why we need to invest in what you are doing. And if I speak to out of 10 artists in Ghana about who collect their art, they will tell me that out of that 10%, just 1% are Ghanaian collectors. So this is where the conversation starts, So I mean, patience is it's hard, it's very stressful. I mean, working and the madness that comes into all the works and stuff. Running a gallery, being a publisher, being a creative director, it's a lot of work. Art on it all, the creative scene on it all, it's a lot of. But I think what has really helped me to get this far is patience.
Okay, and on that note, thank you for being patient with this panel. And I want to just thank my guests, Femi, Ademrele, Lily, and...
Thank you.